So once again, thank you for joining. I appreciate everyone taking the time off their busy schedule to attend the webinar. The focus today, as you can see, will be Cloud Backup and Disaster Recovery as a Service, DRaaS. Giving the webinar, hosting the webinar today will be Justin Giroux from Veeam Software, who's located in Georgia. Welcome, Justin. And for those of you who don't know me, Ernesto Pellegrino, Data Availability Architect at Assurance IT. So it is a joint webinar, Assurance IT and Veeam. So a little bit, everyone knows who Veeam is, right? So I believe a lot of the people on this call today are Veeam customers. So and a little bit about Assurance IT for those of you who don't know who Assurance IT is. Well, Assurance IT is a Veeam Cloud and service provider, right? So for all the Veeam customers, we plug into your Veeam backup and replication servers. We're located in Montreal in a state-of-the-art data center in downtown Montreal. 100% of our infrastructure is hosted at a secure facility in Canada, right? It's important to know that when your data gets moved or you offload your backups to Assurance IT, the data resides in Canada and it's managed by Canadian experts. Perfect. Move on to the next slide. Right, so the table of contents, the summary of the webinar at a high level. We'll go through the 3-2-1 rule. For you, those of you who are not aware of the 3-2-1 rule, we'll go through the details and why it matters. We'll focus on the strategic benefits of using cloud backup and disaster recovery as a service. We'll drive through some use cases. Then we'll move on to Veeam Cloud Connect, the mechanism that makes it all happen. We'll see how it works. Justin will drive us through a couple of architecture slides, and then we'll go into a demo into his lab environment and get to see how easy it plugs into your Veeam backup and replication console. Again, it's all managed within the customer site. And lastly, like I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat and we'll go through those FAQs and take action on them at the end of the call. Fantastic. So data is changing. Over the last decade, right, a couple of milestones over the last decade and why data is changing, how it's changing. There's 3 pillars that we use to identify or to categorize how data is changing. The first pillar being data criticality, right? What's the value of your data? A lot of customers really have different types of businesses, right? And different costs associated to what their data is worth to them, right? So in the event of a disaster, in the event of a ransomware attack, right? What would be the real cost of not having your data available? The cost of the penalties that you would incur if that data is not available, depending on your organization. The second pillar we look at is data growth. Veeam has seen more than 50% growth over the last decade, right? Massive cost, complexity, difficult to manage, and let alone secure it, right? So data is growing. How do we encompass that? How do we try to control that data growth and really drive it into your data availability strategy? And the third pillar, data sprawl. This is big. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of customers, organizations moving to a hybrid strategy, right? Private cloud, public cloud, Amazon, Azure, Google, SaaS applications, Office 365, Exchange, OneDrive, right? It's a lot of apps, a lot of different locations. How do you manage all this data across this hybrid cloud? Okay, so that's a little bit in context, how data is changing and how we've seen it change over the last decade. 3-2-1 rule. Simple. So regardless of your organization, this is the basis of your disaster recovery plan, right? So essentially 3-2-1, what does it mean? you need to have 3 copies of your data. Copy on your SAN, second, offset to a backup repository, which is on site, and a third copy could be to tape or to cloud, right? So as long as you have 3 copies of your data, very important. 2 types of media, spinning disk on your SAN, could be spinning disk on your backup repository, as I mentioned, to tape, or as a lot of organizations are doing now, leveraging S3 object storage. And we could talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit further down in the slide deck. And for sure, copy offsite. All right, getting your data offline, which is critical. In the event, we had a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the 5 key strategies on how to combat ransomware, right? Getting your data offsite, offline is critical. We all know with ransomware, once they penetrate within the organization, they can lock files, right? So with those administrator rights, we need to ensure that if it's offsite, it's offline, so they can access that data and we could safely restore it. Okay, so data protection. The multi-cloud with Assurance IT, the key use cases. Okay, today, as I said, we're going to focus on cloud backup and disaster recovery as a service. So as I have conversations with customers, with organizations, and we drive through the conversation and the customer says, we do have cloud backup, we get our data offsite, we move it offsite, we have a disaster recovery strategy. The answer is yes, right? Like I showed you a couple of slides before, it's critical to have your data offsite as a primary strategy for data availability. But then you need to ask yourself the question, do I need disaster recovery as a service? Simple. What drives that conversation is RTO and RPO, right? Recovery time objective, recovery point objective. Recovery point, when we're doing backups, typically it's 24 hours, right? We do a backup nightly and we store it offsite. So if you need to recover, the recovery point will be the last backup. But what if your recovery point, your organization tells you that I can't lose 24 hours of data. I can only settle for 2 hours of data or real time, right? That's when we have to look at a technology that allow us to be able to protect that data and shorten our recovery point objective, right? Then we stem into recovery time objective, right? We have our data, it's offsite, it's backed up, it's on tape. But what's the time it's going to take you to rehydrate that data, get it back online, and get your applications working again, right? A lot of companies that are moving their backups offsite, whether it be to tape to cloud, and their only strategy is cloud backup without replication, we're typically seeing recovery time objectives of 48 to 72 hours. Right, with disaster recovery as a service bundled with Veeam, with Cloud Connect replication, we can get those recovery time objectives to 15 minutes. And Justin will drive through those use cases later in the webinar. Then we move on to the second use case, cloud data retention. Right, how long do we need to keep our data? Are there compliances that force us to keep our data for 3 years, 7 years? Right, what strategies are we looking at around data retention? Can we leverage the cloud? Thirdly is public cloud and SaaS data protection, right? As I mentioned before, a lot of organizations are moving to Azure, Amazon. How are we backing up that data? How are we backing up our Office 365 data? You know, the mindset is it's in the cloud, it's available, it's online. We signed the contract, 99.99. Availability is one thing, but that data that resides in those applications, that data that resides in those cloud instances belong to you, right? That data is your organization's data. Are we backing it up? Do we have a copy in case they get hijacked or they get ransomware attacked? What do we do then, right? So that's something we need to look into. And thirdly is the cloud tier, object storage, introduced in Veeam 9.5 version 4, update 4, is the scale-out backup repository, where we see customers buying faster on-site repositories in order to be able to leverage Sure Backup, which is a feature within Veeam Backup and Replication, to power on their machines on those faster storage repositories, and leverage S3 to scale out those archives, scale out those backups that are 7 days plus, right? And again, we'll look at that, and that's an offering that Assurance IT will be offering starting Q1 2020. You'll be sure to get you'll be sure to see it in the newsletter. Okay, so hold on here. Having some technical difficulties. Moving on. Okay, so
right.
At this point, yeah, Justin, I'm going to be handing off the slide deck to yourself.
All right. Can you see everything on my side? Good to go?
Can. Yep.
Perfect. All right. So let's kind of start off with the high-level architectural overview and how all this works. So in the upper left-hand corner here, we have Assurance IT's infrastructure. So it's a couple different components. We've got our backup replication server, and that's where we run Cloud Connect. Honestly, it's really just the same backup replication you run on-prem, but there's a particular license that we put on there that enables all the Cloud Connect functionality. And what that is it really just becomes an external repository or host-to-host target for your replication. So on the back end here, we'll have different repositories that will carve off some space for you based upon your SLAs. We'll have some different hosts that you can fail onto, and there'll be a certain amount of resources and compute power associated with it. And then on the front end, we'll have a cloud gateway that you'll connect into. And you also have the availability console, which will give you insights into it. And we'll step into a demo with that in a few seconds. So really, this is just it's a single port open on the internet. So there's no VPN required. So you don't have to deal with the overhead and all that other stuff. You don't have to have that always up and running. Really, it's just a Veeam to Veeam connection. So I'll show you this towards the end of the demo, but you're just going to go through and add Assurance IT as a service provider. And any resources that you have within your contract will automatically be created for you within your Veeam infrastructure. So this will allow a couple different things. So for our on-prem VMs, the different workloads we have with the Windows and the Linux agents, both the server and workstation mode. So we have different types depending upon what type of workload you're looking to protect. Or if you have any public cloud stuff, we can go through and utilize the agents there as well. All of those will have a secure connection down into this gateway, which will pass the data along into the Cloud Connect server and then to the appropriate repository or replication target. So it's all safe, all secure, all Veeam to Veeam, and you don't have to worry about the overhead of the VPNs and everything that kind of goes along with that. So let's kind of drill down into a little bit on the replication portion. So the backup as a service, that's fairly common. You're just sending your backup copy to someone. So let's kind of talk about what we're doing with replication. So on the left-hand side here, we have our customer environments. So you'll have backup replication servers there. You'll have, some Hyper-V, VMware, whatever it may be. And what we're going to do is we're going to send this data over into Assurance IT's infrastructure. We're going to land it on their side of things. And then what we do is we create what we call a hardware plan. And that's based upon your level of your service level agreement. So you're going to have a certain amount of CPU, memory, storage, etc. So that if you are going to be failed over, you don't have to worry about competing for resources with anyone else that might be failed over at the same time. You'll have a certain amount that's dedicated to you at all points in time, and you'll just be doing some right-click, type of actions to initiate said failover. And there's a couple different ways we could do that, and I'll step through those during the demo. But from a high level, it's mostly just sending data over here and having it ready. So with that, let's kind of step through this step by step. So this is what it looks like. So this is kind of going through the full site failover, but we can accomplish partial site ones as well. So if a single VM goes down, it's sort of the same underpinnings on the back end. So what we're initially going to do is go through, run a replication routine from the production site to the DR side. And this is going to be a full, fully hydrated, warm standby, powered off VM. So it's a VMDK, VHD, VHDX, whatever it may be. It's more or less just ready to be powered on. And then we're going to have a set schedule for how often we push that data over. So maybe every 15, 30 minutes. There's going to be a certain amount of data and a certain amount of bandwidth, and there'll be a fine spot between the two where you can go and accomplish the routine over and over again. So they're more or less just sitting there in sync with your production server. And then what you do is, let's say something goes wrong. So say a single VM goes down or the entire host goes down. Well, we just go and migrate your workload over there. And it's just a right-click option. So you can also set up a failover plan. So if I want to account for the entire host going down, I can set the order in which the VMs are brought back up, and I can have a delay between them, just so I don't have any sort of race conditions, no interdependencies being met between them because they came up out of order. Just so when you get everything back up and running, you're good to go and you don't have to wait for anything to sort out. Then you just migrate your users over to the DR side and continue working there. You'll be provided public IPs if you do the full host to host. And once it's all said and done, we do have a failback to production command. So what that's going to do is when we're on the DR side, we'll keep track of what blocks have changed. So we're going to just push that delta back over to the production side when it's all good. And that way you're effectively just passing the ball back and forth between production and DR. So you just got to migrate your users back and forth, or you can set up load balancing, all that good stuff. And it'll just kind of get everything on the one server when it's all said and done. Now, there is the availability console as we touched on. So this will be sort of your way to go through and monitor how everything's doing. Now, I should also make note, Assurance IT does have their own availability console, which they're going to give you little portal accounts on. So this is sort of that 10,000-foot view, single pane of glass, where they can just manage all these different Veeam installs. So they'll know if you have any alarms going off and things like that. They can kind of keep an eye on things on the back end. But what we can also do is provide you a portal account so you get a filtered view based upon your own environment. So give me 1 second. I'll pull this up over here. You can see what that looks like. So bring this over here. So when you log in, and they'll provide you your proper credentials and everything, you'll land here in your summary view. So you can see all your different VMs and agent backups and how they're looking from a high level. You can check on your cloud backup quota and see how much you have in total and what's being used. And it'll all be based upon your SLAs. And if you are doing replication as well, you can come in here and see, they're called hardware plans, as I mentioned. So you can see how the different hardware plans look and what you're utilizing and how much you have left, just so when you log in, you know exactly what type of resources you currently have available to you. Now, there are some different dashboards within here. So if I want to go through and look at my active alarms, I can come in here and see them. So latest on top, earliest on bottom. Now, some of these are pretty obvious. So like VM without backup, I could probably figure that one out without clicking it. But just know if you want to figure out why that alarm went off, you could just click it here and it'll show you the knowledge base article. So you don't have to hop on Google and try to figure out what's causing it. And then over here, we have our protected computers view. And it's really just a high-level overview of everything that's protected within your environment. So both virtual machines and computers. So you can see where they're located, how the job's set up, what type it is, how many points you can fall back to, the last time we took a backup, where it's located, all that different stuff, just so you get that peace of mind. And then over here, we have the management portion. This is where we have a bunch of different options. So let's kind of start in the upper right-hand corner. Manage backup servers. What is that exactly? Well, that's your backup replication server, and it's just being managed by the Cloud Connect because when you sign in as a service, when you add them as a service provider, you're going to allow them to see all this different data so they compile these dashboards for you. And from here, you can see all the different installs. So if you happen to have multiple sites with multiple VMs, you can make sure that all those are under your purview from within here. So you can see, the job statuses, what type of job it is, last time it ran, where it ran to. And there are some different options. So if you want to come in here and modify the view, you have that option. So if I want to see like the bottleneck, I can add that in, just get it from a glance so I can start troubleshooting why. And then when we get over here, we have the monitor backup agents. So these are agents that the availability console is monitoring. So these are typically pushed out from the backup servers. It's kind of a read-only mode, so you can't go and control them because that's controlled by the backup server, but you can see how they're all doing. Now, last but not least, we do have managed backup agents, and these are agents that you've pushed from the availability console. So I'm not going to go super in depth, but just know that there's a way to go through and push agents into your environments. And then the availability console will determine how they act. So you can come in here and see their job statuses. You can start and stop different routines, and you can have them right to different locations. It's just kind of an easy way to go through to get agents in your environment without having to have a full-blown backup replication server. So we can have further discussions if that's something you'd like to deploy within your environment. Now, another thing we should make note of here is the failover plans. So if you do have a failover plan set up for if your host were to go down, if you got to call someone up, tell them, hey, it's customer XYZ, everything just went down, can you start up the failover plan for me? That's going to increase the recovery time. So what we have here is just a way you can log right into the portal, go over to your failover plans, and just start them, and you can undo them when you're ready to go. So just, customer-facing, easy way, log in, just take 30 seconds, and get you back up and running even faster. Now, down here are some of the discovery rules. So this is more related to pushing the agents out. Just know that we can go through and create a discovery routine. So we can go and scan a particular IP range. We can tap into AD. You can upload a CSV file. And we'll just look for machines based upon the criteria that you defined. And then we'll push agents to them. And then they just show up under here under your managed computers. So you'll see your discovered backup agents. And you can go and modify the policies. So if I want to go and have this guy write to a certain place, like a local NAS, maybe have this one write to my Cloud Connect, you can go through and set up exactly how these agents work because they're being managed by the availability console. And then down here, the last but not least part is the reporting. So you can go through and see the particular invoices, and you can go and pay them and get them marked as all that good stuff, just so you can kind of see what's going on. And also, we do have some reports. So if you want to go through and just kind of pull a report, maybe your manager says, hey, you can just give me a report on all the backup statuses, you can come in here and generate one and then just show it to them and go, look, everything's good to go. And last but not least, there are a couple of configuration options. And so we do have the different portal users. So you can go and add in different users for your particular account. You can go and define the different backup policies. So if I want this to back up once a day, twice a day, where it wants to back up, all the different stuff, you just assign that to the agents. And last but not least, if you don't like when we set off these alarms, so say like the repository free space alarm, you can come in here and modify when it's shown for you. So, you get a warning at 90%, but if you want it to be at, 80%, you could change that to 20% free space. So there is that ability to control it based upon your particular requirements. And last but not least, you can add in your company info here just so we can keep track of all that for them. But yeah, it's really just a quick and easy way to go through and see how your entire site's looking, or multiple sites, and how it stands within the Veeam environment. So with that, let's kind of dive back to the slide for 1 second. And on the next one, so Cloud Connect. This is going to be a demo of how we go through and set up Cloud Connect, or well, tap into Cloud Connect. And bear with me, this will be very fast. So let's kind of go in here. So what we'll do is we got our Veeam backup replication. You may have noticed this before under your backup infrastructure. There's this service provider option. So really it's just coming in, adding a new service provider. So point towards the DNS here. Now do make sure you check this box. This is going to enable all of your different job statuses, alarms, and other metrics to flow into the Cloud Connect server. And that's what builds out those dashboards for us when we log into the availability console. So give permission for them to monitor everything. Click next. Honestly, it's just this simple. So it'll verify the certificate, you add in your username and password. Once we're done, we click apply and it'll go through the gateway, authenticate against the Cloud Connect, and it automatically creates any resources you've been assigned. So if you go to your backup repositories, you can now see any repositories you have access to, and you'll know that they're cloud ones because they'll say type cloud, and that's in the description. And whatever your capacity is just ties into the current quota that you have assigned to you. So if you run out, you could just call them up and go, hey, can I double my quota? I got some more data to send you, because you'll see your free versus use space. Now, to get data offsite, a couple different ways to do it. So let's start off with a backup copy job. So let's just say we're implementing the 3-2-1 rule. So I've got my production data store, I've got my local copy, and I just want to get something offsite in a secure way. Well, I can come in here and say, let's check every X number of minutes, hours, or days. So it's really your call how often you want to send this data. So I could be doing hourlies on site, but let's just say I want to send one copy offsite once per day. You can time it according to your particular needs. And then it's just really going, hey, these are the particular objects I want to send offsite. So point towards those backups. And here's the target I want to send it to. And that's it. Just point towards that cloud repository that we created for you. And just say how many points in time I want to keep. So, maybe 14 days worth. Let's say maybe we do 7 days on site, 14 days off site. So I have a longer restore window, whatever your needs may be. And maybe you need to do some sort of GFS backups, grandfather, father, son. So if you have any legal or regulatory requirements, or maybe just best policy, keep X amount of weekly, monthly, quarterly, or yearly backups, just plug those in here. We'll make sure we keep them and generate them on the repository on the other end, just for long-term storage. That's more or less it. Now for a replication routine, it's basically just a normal replica routine. So I'm going to kind of skim over this one because people are probably familiar with it. Just know there's a couple of options. So we do have a replica seeding option. So let's say you start off with just doing a backup copy job, but then you kind of go, hey, maybe I should start doing some high availability failover stuff. Well, if you got a replica, or excuse me, if you have a backup over there already, we can use that as a seed for the replica, just so you don't have to push the full across the wire. And if you need to, remap the network or change the IP of it when it comes back up, we can do that in automated routine too. Then it's just coming through and saying, hey, let's do it for these particular machines, and let's send them over here. So choose the particular place it's going to land, and this will be all provided. So fill all those out, and then just say what you want the suffix to be. So if you've got VM1 on host A, that'll become VM1_replica on host B. And then you can specify how many restore points you want to keep. Now, best practice, do have more than one. Just let's go with the worst case scenario. You had one particular restore point. Production got hit with a virus. You happen to time your replica routine 5 minutes later. Congratulations, you've infected the DR side as well, and you have no failback. So I beseech you, please keep more than one restore point, just because I've heard some horror stories. That's pretty much it. So you can go through. We'll just do everything automatically for how we transfer it over. If you want to do application-aware processing, you can enable that here, just like with a backup job. So for, AD, Exchange, SharePoint, or SQL, anything that needs to be transactionally consistent. And then it's just how often you want to run it. So let me turn that off. So come in here. Let's do it every hour, every X number of minutes, or even continuously. So once the routine's done, start it up again. It's really down to your requirements. And those will get sent over. Now, once they're over there, what we do is we come down to our replicas, and we'll have ones that are ready. That just means that it's been fully rehydrated, and it's ready to go. So I can right-click, and I can do a partial failover. So just fail over this particular VM, and it'll go with the latest point in time. But you can specify one in the past if you happen to know that a virus went over there, or you just need to go back in time for whatever reason. Now, there's also a planned failover. So if you have like an upcoming maintenance window or some sort of inclement weather that might take your production site down, you can plan the failover in advance. So we'll force the sync of the latest and greatest. So we're more or less just handing the ball over to the DR side. So it takes a little bit more time because we have to transfer that and merge those blocks on top. But we'll boot it up once that's done and then just migrate over there and you're good to go. And as I kind of mentioned before during these slides, we do have failover plans. So if you want to plan for the entire host just blowing up or whatever it may be, you can specify exactly how they're going to go through and start those VMs up with the appropriate delay between them. And last but not least, like I said, once you're ready to go back to production, we'll keep track of all those blocks that have changed, push that Delta back over, and then boot that machine up for you. So just a seamless transfer from A to B. Oh, and last but not least, I should make a note. So let's say you're doing backup routines, maybe nightly, but you're doing replica routines, every 30 minutes. And maybe something got deleted after a backup was taken and you didn't catch it, but one of your replicas did. You can source your guest file and application item restores from your replicas too. So it is above and beyond strictly just failover. You can source items from them. And that's kind of the basics of it all. So let's kind of bring the slide deck back up. There we go. So sort of a last but not least. So what is the value of all this? Oh, sorry. You want to take this one?
Yeah, Justin, I'll take this slide. But if we can just go back to that previous slide, right? Just a couple of points I like to mention. If you want to just show your screen again. Just a little bit behind the mechanism of the backup copy, right? So backup copy showed us two ways to get your data offsite, right? One being the backup copy. The backup copy is essentially going to do a copy of your backup job files and send it to Assurance IT, which is your cloud provider. So no impact to production, right? Whereas when we're doing replication jobs, just like if you were doing replication site to site or site to cloud in this case, it will call your VMs if you're using VMware, Hyper-V, or create a snapshot, copy the Delta, and reapply the snapshot. Okay, so just a little bit about the mechanisms behind backup copy and replication. Perfect.
Yep, thank you.
So I'll take the slide. Yeah, so I'll start sharing my screen again. Here we go. Excellent. You see my screen?
We sure can.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Justin. That was a very good overview of how simple it is to connect Cloud Connect backup or replication hardware plans, failover plans into your Veeam backup and replication console. So a couple of key takeaways, right? So the value of leveraging a Veeam powered cloud service provider like Assurance IT, right? So there's 4 key criteria. One being increased recovery, right? So as we mentioned earlier, cloud backup is a disaster recovery option. However, leveraging replication increases your recovery time in the case of a disaster strikes and increases and diminishes your recovery time objective. You get the power on those machines in a quickly and effective manner without having to rehydrate the data. Second, pricing, right? When we look at the scenario of having to create your own secondary environment in order to replicate, typically we associate CapEx costs, right? New storage, new switches, new servers to be able to handle that primary load. Leveraging a cloud provider like Assurance IT, you can benefit from moving from a CapEx to an OpEx type modeling. Build monthly, build yearly on consumption. Really, it's like leasing the resources you need in order to meet your project requirements. Third, compliance, right? Data retention, be able to move data and hold data for longer periods of time. Assurance IT can help you with that. Compliance, as I mentioned earlier in the slide deck, Canadian-based, data resides in Canada. And of course, the fourth one, where it allows you the freedom to innovate, take your focus off backup and DR and focus on net new project, customer or enterprise specific projects to enhance and enable your business. Fantastic. Luigi, I hand it over to you for questions.
Yeah, so I just put something in the chat room here. I'm not sure if any questions. There's none that have come in yet, but maybe while we're waiting for any questions, I just want to say great job by both Ernesto and Justin. That was a great demo. Fantastic, easy to use. It's obvious. Veeam is a fantastic solution. Just want to let everyone know we will be sending out the, while we're waiting for questions here, just so you know, we will be sending out the recorded webinar to all those registered. We had a pretty good registration this time around. I think since we record them, not everyone feels the need to attend live. But nonetheless, you'll be getting that. And at the same time, as usual, we offer all our clients a way to trial this, either cloud backup or disaster recovery as a service. We can work with you and your team to put a terabyte of data in our cloud with one VM to kind of just show you quickly how that works. For disaster recovery as a service and show you replication, it does get a little bit more comprehensive in terms of setup, but we are also happy to work with you. We provide like a 30-day trial. So I'll send that in the chat room here as well. And when you do receive our email with the recorded webinar link, you will also have the ability to reply to us if you are willing to try out the free 1 terabyte cloud offering. So if there's any questions, please don't hesitate. You can put them in the chat room.
Perfect. While we're waiting for questions, Luigi, what I'll do is I'll turn everybody's attention to our LinkedIn page, right? So for everyone that has a LinkedIn account, feel free to follow our LinkedIn page. We typically keep it up to date with recurring events, industry-related information. Examples, the last two posts that we recorded in LinkedIn were Veeam has recently released a how-to videos section, simple videos, 5 minutes each, really demonstrating the key basic tasks that an administrator would do in Veeam. If you have any questions, for example, what is replication? Get a little bit more in depth with a whiteboard session. Excellent resource. Another article that was recently published is the Veeam On virtual event happening November 20th. Right, a lot of technical deep dives, a lot of sessions. Again, feel free to sign up. You can find the link on our LinkedIn page. Again, if you can't attend, sign up and you'll get the recordings to view at your own pace, your own time. So Luigi, I turn it back to you. Any questions?
We do have a question from Andy. So he's asking, is the data deduped at all?
The data is compressed, right? So, but no deduplication. You're free to dedupe on site and send the data over. Andy, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any further questions or you want me to expand on that. Okay.
We can, yeah, and also a subsequent question from Andy is, do you get free test failovers? I'm not sure I understand that question.
Well, I guess if they want to test it, right? I'm sure we can work together to get a proof of concept in place in order for it to meet your needs. And in regards to failover, it leads me to another question, right? So we saw the replication piece, right? We saw where Justin enabled the cloud service provider and walked you through a replication job, right? So what's happening there is we're replicating the data over to our Assurance IT data center, right? And then you do have the power to turn it on in the event of a planned failover or a complete disaster, where Assurance IT will allocate resources, CPU and memory, where you can power on those VMs at all times, test at all times, and we encourage that, right? So you're renting, an example is you're renting a locker room space, right? You have the key, you have access to it, and the road is paved, right? So how many times you go there and store stuff, it's really up to you. In this event, it's the same scenario, right? So you're moving your data over, you're sending your replication targets. Feel free to do some planned failover testing, and we could help you with that.
Good explanation, Ernesto. Next question is from Samuel. Could you talk a little bit about pricing structure? We don't like to talk about pricing per se on these types of webinars, but our pricing is very simple, guys and gals on the phone. Very simple. We price per terabyte and per number of VMs that you are storing from a Cloud Connect perspective, or Cloud Backup, number of VMs and number of terabytes that you will consume in our cloud. And then from a disaster recovery perspective, it's number of very similar, because it's the number of VMs we're going to be replicating, the amount of space that you're going to be needing to replicate, and then obviously the compute resources that are going to be assigned to you that will be required in the event of a power on at our environment. So very simple pricing structure. Since we work with Veeam, we like to keep things very simple. And customers have appreciated our pricing structure. What we'll do, Samuel, is we can send you a subsequent email afterwards, and we can connect on that. I don't see any more questions at this point, so maybe we want to. Oh, you're welcome, Samuel. So I think we can go ahead and bring it to a close, Ernesto.
I'd like to thank everyone for joining, taking time from your busy day. Hope the information was valuable. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Assurance IT team. We're glad to help and help you and guide you through your data availability strategy. Have a great afternoon, everyone.